This is Ray Hanania on Politics Podcast, November 13, 2025. You can get info on my columns at hanania.com. My guest today is Paul Vallas, who ran for mayor of Chicago in 2023. A former Chicago Public Schools CEO, Vallas ran on a platform focused on public safety, crime reduction, and school improvement, all the big three issues that you had to deal with and still need to be dealt with in Chicago. He was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and many other business groups. He made it to the runoff in a big field of candidates, but unfortunately, he lost to Brandon Johnson, who was backed by the powerful Chicago Teachers Union. Vallas served as superintendent of the Bridgeport Public Schools in Connecticut and the Recovery School District of Louisiana in the past. He was also the CEO of both the School District of Philadelphia and the Chicago Public Schools. And of course, where I met him as a former budget director for the city of Chicago. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So of course, already they're talking about another election, Brandon Johnson. He's a nice guy. Believe me, he's a decent guy, but I don't know if he doesn't understand how to be mayor, or Chicago's problems are so great, nobody can deal with them. How do you view, first of all, Brandon? I mean, and in fairness, he is an elected official, so he has to be accountable. How do you view him, and how do you view the challenges that a mayor needs to be able to address that are or are not being addressed today?
Yeah, look, having participated in close to 40 forums with Brandon and all the other candidates, I will tell you right now that he was the least equipped candidate who was running. Brandon Johnson is a failed teacher. Yeah. He lasted 4 years at Jenner School, a school I built, by the way, in Cabrini Green before they tore Cabrini Green down. And he lasted 1 year at Westinghouse High School. I will tell you, had it not been for his connections and for his militancy in terms of the Chicago Teachers Union, he probably would have been fired as a teacher. So, Brandon, so basically the city's being led by a guy who could not cut it in the classroom. Look, he brags about never believing in testing kids. In other words, what he did was he just just as a teacher, there was absolutely no accountability. And he's brought kind of that shtick to the mayor's office. He clearly was the selection of Tony Preckwick. If you remember, Tony Preckwick got him to run against Richard Boykins, who had challenged the pop tax. If you remember, and he's now running for Congress for Danny Davis's seat. So Preckwick was picked to oust Boykins from his commissioner seat. And of course, clearly he was Stacey Davis Gates' candidate. And the irony is we have a failed teacher running the city who is the wholly owned subsidiary of a union run by another failed teacher, Stacey Davis Gates, who lasted, I think, barely 5 or 6 years as a teacher before joining the union. So that's what they did. They found refuge in the union, and they made their marks as union organizers. So when they're all talking about their teaching experience, look, I was a social studies teacher, I was a history teacher. I mean, this guy doesn't know history. If he does, it's a warped view of history. But at the end of the day, he is just totally ill-equipped. And when you don't have the skills, you don't have the knowledge base, and when your claim to fame have been being an organizer and being kind of a rabble rouser and being a militant, he
was part of the union. He was part of the union, right? And he was a union guy that the union felt comfortable that they could work with. That's all it was. So you ran for mayor. You understand and I think you've ran before too, haven't you? Was that the first time?
I was one of the first to challenge Rahm Emanuel.
That's right.
Look, I do not wax nostalgia for Rahm Emanuel. I thought Rahm Emanuel was a disaster as the mayor.
Yeah, he was.
You had a big scandal in Chicago Public Schools involving Rahm Emanuel that they took responsibility for. The LaQuan McDonald cover-up. People forget that during Rahm Emanuel's first term, he totally gutted the police department to the tune of 2,200 positions, gutted the Detectives Bureau, and crime, the murder rate, the violent crime rate skyrocketed like 40%. It wasn't
Right.
until the second term that let's just say that he found Jesus and he decided to, restore those police vacancies. So I thought it was a disaster. He also delayed taking any action to tackle the city's major financial problems, which meant in his second term, he suddenly had to go in and raise property taxes, what, $600 million?
Right.
So yeah, I
He
thought it
did.
was very effective. So I
You know,
challenged him. I challenged him, and I actually, the polling had me and Willie Wilson, either me or Willie in a runoff against him, and the polling had me defeating him in the runoff. But what happened was when he dropped out, everybody and their brother got into the race, including Bill Daley and Gary Chico and others, and Ferretti, and so by that time I was lost in the crowd. So really, the campaign never ended. I was hopeful that Lori Lightfoot might be able to do a better
that,
job, but obviously she fell flat. And
right.
so,
She wasn't very good either. Now, what do you have plans at all for running, or are you looking
oh,
at candidates to support?
yeah, we're looking post-election with my supporters and backers. We really became big backers of the Urban Center to build a grassroots political organization that could counter the teachers union. And
Right.
we helped Eileen Burke, thank God, get elected.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Thank you. And thank you. Let me just pause and say thank you for that. Okay, Paul, because she has brought a very important change to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
Yeah, yeah,
One
absolutely.
that ends the fright that, her predecessor, Kim
Yeah.
Fox brought to the county. It was terrible.
My urban centers, the urban centers backers were her biggest financial supporters. We also defeated 7 of the 10 teacher union candidates for the school board in the first round of school board elections. We were also very active in getting the word out about Evans and the reappointment of Evans, the fact that there was going to be a behind closed door selection process. And then, of course, we were at the tip of the spear on the real estate transfer tax defeat. So,
Right.
so we've been building a grassroots organization to challenge the union, and it's a big tent. But we've been interviewing candidates for mayor. I think we've had an interview with maybe 8 or 9 candidates. The whole idea is to find a candidate who can not only beat Johnson, but more importantly, can govern.
Right.
We don't need a mediocrity to be in the mayor's office. We don't need somebody to be running for mayor who's only running because it's on his bucket list and has never given deep thought to what it's going to take to turn the city around.
And
And
I
so
know it.
that's what we're doing.
And I know it's too early for any endorsement. I mean, we're maybe at that toward the end of next year or the middle of next year. But do you have any preferences looking at good people, or you don't? If you want to mention some names, if you don't, it's up to you.
I'm not going to mention those names yet because I don't want to put them on the spot.
Okay.
But among the candidates we've interviewed, I like to say there's 2 or 3 grown-ups. And I have basically said that, and when people say, I'm going to run, I'm not planning on running, and I would prefer not to run. I'm more than happy to continue to do what I'm doing. As you know, I do an issue-oriented piece every Monday in the Contrarian, problem solution. That's what I am. You've known me for like
Right.
4 years now.
Right.
I mean, I'm a wonk, but I've told people that if I believe that some of the inside interests, the special interests are going to close ranks around an alternative to Johnson, who is not going to be somebody who's going to move the city forward, is not going to be willing to take on the Chicago Teachers Union, because I believe that the Chicago Teachers Union is the greatest threat to the future of this city. And I believe that the Chicago Teachers Union is the biggest obstacle to seeing the transformation in the educational transformation to the benefit of low-income families, particularly Black and Latino low-income families. If no one is willing to take them on, then I may very well just say, you know what, I'm gonna enter the primary. But I'm not planning on doing it, and I'm hoping we can close ranks around a candidate who can move the city forward.
Is it because the teachers union's entire first of all, I love unions. I've been a union person all my life. I don't think unions should run government, though. How do you have a balanced negotiation between a government and a union when the union runs the government? So
I,
it seems like the union was running candidates because they wanted to promote their agenda with the teachers, which is great. But you can't put the teachers' needs above the government and the taxpayers' needs. It just
look,
doesn't make sense.
look, it's gone beyond that. And let me look. I was endorsed by every union except just not FOP. I was endorsed firefighters, trades. I was endorsed by every union with the exception of SEIU, and asked me who was neutral and who always was very fair to me, and of course Chicago Teachers Union. But of course, those two unions are the most active. Uh, the Chicago Teachers Union is not a traditional union anymore. They are a political party.
Right.
And Ray, what happened was, and it really happened about 2010. The national teacher unions were losing ground to the school reform movement, particularly charter schools. And charter schools are not-for-profit public schools that are not mandated to have a contracts with the teacher unions. Anyway, long story short, they were losing ground during the Clinton administration, during Bush administration. If you remember, he had Race to the Top. During the Obama administration, No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was Bush. Race to the Top was Obama. The bottom line is they were, in fact, the Obama administration and Arnie Duncan, they were mandating that states change their laws to make it easier to close schools, to hold schools accountable, to convert schools to charter schools, conditional on them getting more money. So what they did, Karen Lewis in Chicago and Randy Weingart in New York and others, is they needed allies. So they decided to align themselves with the progressive left. And which is what they did. And
to build their base.
Yeah, and they became the bank for the progressive left. They became the bank for the socialists. They became the bank for the anti-establishment groups. Like my mother used to say, who you hang around with, you become more like. Well, what happened was the union itself became more radicalized. So they are really, you could call the Chicago Teachers Union the Socialist Party of Chicago. They are the dominant party, and of course, the Kaiser Sose of Chicago politics, Cook County politics. The kind of the puppeteer along with Stacey Davis Gates is Tony Preckwinkle, who gave us Fox, who helped give us Johnson, who basically gave us all those liberal judges, orchestrated their appointments. They would only endorse judges who passed the litmus test, who gave us the disastrous pretrial release that was also a major reason for the surge in crime post 2019. I mean, she's part of that cabal.
And I'm going to segue away from politics just for 1 second because education is so important, especially to taxpayers. It's 70% of our bill. 65 to 70% of my taxes go to schools. And it seems that, when I look at the salaries, I'm looking at superintendents that are in high schools that are making $300,000 a year. Now, I want the teachers to earn the 100,000, the 120,000. I think that's a great salary. But when one person runs a school district and makes 300,000, you got to wonder about what's the priority, the organization and the teachers, structure, the administration, or the education of the students?
Well, the unions get certainly share a lot of the blame for really the demise or the degrading of quality public education in this country. There's no doubt about it. I mean, since whenever they're debating whether or not the United States Department of Education should be retained, and really for the Trump administration, it's an issue of the bureaucrats, not the programs, because the funding programs remain. They just want to get rid of bureaucracy. I always point out that the test scores have not improved. I mean, 50 years now, the gap has not narrowed, and there's been the complete mismanagement of the student loan program that has just these young
And don't they
people,
lower the requirements
and
too? Like for
they've now
what
been
is
lowering the standards.
qualified to go to
Right.
college? They're
You
making it.
know, yeah, to make it
They're
easier.
trying to make themselves look better, like we're sending kids to
Right.
college, but really, it's like taking a D
Right.
student. Listen, I was not the brightest kid in school. I was a D student. I remember the principal called my mom in and said, if little Raymond tries really hard, he could be a C student one day. But it was a good teacher that woke me up and got me into writing, and that I didn't even know I had that talent. So teachers can be so impactful, so
Absolutely.
supportive.
Absolutely.
But we don't seem to focus on the education anymore. We're focused on the money, the structure. And why is the teachers union involved in politics? Do you understand what I'm saying? They're more of a political force than they are
Exactly.
as an educational force, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. But let me make a comment just to get back to where the blame
Go
needs
ahead.
to fall. I mean, we can complain about the Chicago Teachers Union, and we should, because let's face it, they're advancing an agenda, and it's all about abandoning standards, abandoning accountability, socially promoting kids, giving people bigger salaries, expanding their membership. Let me point out that during COVID, when the schools were shut down for 78 straight weeks with devastating consequences, they added 9,000 more positions to the budget.
Wow.
I mean, 9,000. Today they have
Like
one.
patronage. It's like
They
the new
have
machine. They're the new
today,
machine, right, in
right?
Chicago?
Yeah, and they got them out to vote during the election. Filling out voter forms at daycares and at nursing homes and at retirement homes out there, filling out the mail-in ballots and stuff like that, doing stuff that the Board of Elections should have investigated, but they never did. But it's the nature of politics here in the system. But the point that I want to make is incidentally, there's one employee in the Chicago Public Schools for every 7.3 students. And
Wow. Wow.
23,000 non-teaching employees at Chicago Public Schools. That's almost 12,000 more non-teachers than they have cops. And there are like 7,900 employees in the Chicago Public Schools that aren't even in the schools. In fact, only about 58% of the money, I'm sorry, 54% of the money that goes to Chicago Public Schools gets to the classroom. So they're just
Wow.
skipping money off the top. So it's just
Wow.
not the unions, it's the massive bureaucracy, that
Right.
self-sustaining bureaucracy. They
Classrooms
preserve
used to
themselves.
classrooms used to be 40 students when I was in school. Now it's 20 students on average. And you think that should make it easier to teach for a teacher, but we're not seeing that quality coming out of the Chicago public schools. And I agree. I think it has a lot to do with the emphasis is on politics, not on education. I want to get back to the mayoral election
Yeah,
because education is a big part of what a mayor can help do. A mayor can help change and improve the education in a city, and by improving education, you can minimize crime, you could increase employment, you could increase the economy. The education's like the foundation of all that needs to be
absolutely.
done. What do you tell any candidate or any person who runs for mayor, because you've looked at all these issues over the years, you've been involved in this for so long. What do you tell them they need to do if they're going to be mayor, and once they become mayor, what do they need to do to make it work? Because some people, like I said in the beginning of the program, the problems of Chicago are so insurmountable. Can even Einstein resolve those problems today? Maybe it's impossible. But what do you think they need to do, whoever the next mayor is?
Well, let me point out that I think all the problems Chicago's facing are solvable. And maybe I'm more optimistic that the problems are solvable now than they were
All
in
right.
'93 when I was city budget director. And if you remember, Daley was actually getting his budgets rejected. And at the Harold Washington block was a powerful block then. They had 17. Incidentally, I had unanimous support for all my budgets by the Harold Washington block, except for Helen Schiller, who always voted neutral because she could never vote. She would never vote for a Daley budget, although she liked me. But anyway,
I
long story
liked
short,
Helen. She was a great person. She was a great
Helen was
alderman.
so her and Slim Coleman, man.
Yes, Slim was phenomenal. Bless
Yeah,
his heart.
God rest his soul. But look, I think the teacher union is the and because these budgets are so bloated, because there's so much waste, because there's so much corruption. Believe me, it's easy to. There are more opportunities to really cut costs without necessarily cutting programs if you do the right thing.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, when only 54% of the school district's budgets gets to the schools, when you have almost 8,000 central and regional and citywide staff that don't even spend time in the schools, we have 23,000 non-teaching employees. That suggests that you could probably balance the budget and reprioritize the budget to actually get more resources into the classroom. So there are more opportunities. The problem that we lack here is not ideas, we lack courage.
You just
You
cut.
know,
You have to
yeah,
reduce the size, right? Because I'll tell you what, I'm tired every 10 years. And the Chicago the school system is much like the CTA. Every 10 years, the CTA has a problem, and we go to the suburbs and downstate to find
right.
money,
Like we
and
did this year.
we throw money at the problem instead of answers to the problem. Isn't that what the problem is? We're not giving answers.
Well,
We're just throwing money
yeah,
on it.
absolutely. Well, let me give you a couple simple answers. First of all, let me speak to the school system right now. We have to do two things. Uh, Back in 1995, when Gary Chico and I took over the Chicago Public Schools, and they were facing a projected 4-year $1 billion structural deficit. This is what we did. We radically gutted and decentralized these central office, and we shut down the like 28 regional offices, and we replaced it with six offices, etc. And we essentially radically downsized the central administration and decentralized the budget so we could push money into the classroom. So the net effect was we were able to improve schools while balancing the budget. 6 years later, improved test scores. 6 years later, $3 billion in school construction. 6 years later, uh, 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 historic increases in graduation rates. 6 years later, labor peace of labor peace. 6 years later, we had $1 billion in cash balances. You know why? Because we radically decentralized the schools. We gave the schools much greater autonomy to determine how to spend their money most effectively. We put magnet programs in neighborhood schools. Enrollment, after declining by 115,000 the previous 15 years, enrollment grew by 40,000. We got $250 million more a year in additional state funding simply because our enrollment grew. So at the end of the day, I'm optimistic. Just as that with the right mayor and the right leadership team, you could do that to the schools right now because the schools are even more bloated. Since COVID, they increased funding per pupil by 40%, despite the fact 44%, despite the fact that they lost 38,000 students. But yet per pupil funding went up 40%.
Right. Right. It's
44%.
half the number of students. There were 600,000 when I went to school in the Chicago public schools.
Right.
Now,
That's
what
right.
is it, like 300,000 or
Yeah.
something?
Well, now they're
Twice
down
as
to about.
big of a bureaucracy, half the population of students to educate. And
When
we're
I was
doing,
there, they're at 440. When I left, and now they're at like 315. And if it had not been for the massive increase in illegal migrants, they'd be below 300,000. Look,
wow.
if you radically decentralize the schools and push the money down to the local school level, and then you give the elected local school councils and their principals the autonomy to do things in their schools, to innovate the programs, to construct their staff models, to pick the best models, the best curriculum instructional programs. If you give them the money and the autonomy to do that, you can improve neighborhood schools, and you can not only will that help retain students, but it will help attract students back. And then I truly believe that parents should have the right, if their neighborhood school is failing, to seek, to find another school. to find another school for their children. So, that just doesn't include providing, restoring the state scholarship program, which Pritzker got rid of, which gave scholarships to children from low-income families. But it also means taking advantage of the massive federal program that it was part of the Trump administration Big Beautiful Bill Act, which basically, if 30% of the voters or of the taxpayers in Chicago participated and took the tax credits that are allowed under that new legislation, because the way it's set up, it allows for individuals or even corporations to make a donation to a scholarship providing organization, and they in turn get a significant tax credit as a result of that. And I saw an article written by Arnie Duncan, I think in the New York Times, that said if just 30% of Chicago taxpayers participated in that program, which gives you a really attractive tax credit, it could raise $1 billion, money that will go to parents to pay for tuition to private schools, but also to go to parents who want to hire a tutor to educate their child, or even parents who are homeschooling their children. So two things need to be done. We need to empower the community to control their schools, to be able to bring the type of school models to their schools that make their schools attractive and make the schools effective. And then secondly, we've got to empower parents to have alternatives to their failing schools if those schools are struggling. Educational choice is a constitutional right. The Constitution guarantees not government education, but they guarantee publicly funded education. And I think that's what we need.
All right, we're coming to the end of the program, but
okay.
It sounds like the bottom line is the money that goes into the system is not all going where it's supposed to go.
That's right. That's
right. And the next mayor needs to change that, correct?
Yeah. And the next mayor needs to change that. And the mayor can change that, not to the detriment of the schools. Let me tell you two things that I would do, which would be a number one priority.
Yeah.
And I've written articles, a number of articles on how to balance the school district's budget, how to balance the CTA's budget. I mean, the one thing missing from the CTA, from the whole bailout, is any mandate that the CTA hire real cops to provide security on the transit system. The CTA's biggest problem right now is the loss of ridership. They're only at about 2/3 of the pre-COVID ridership level.
Right.
And the biggest reason they've lost ridership is because of fear of crime. In fact, the fear of crime is impacting their workers, their ability to recruit workers' attendance, because they're afraid to come to work because they're being intimidated. Right. So if you took the $87 million that they spent on private security, unarmed, low-paid private security people, you've seen pictures of them. They all look like they're
right.
Suffice to say, they don't look like they've ever taken a physical. And if walking around with 50 attack dogs, whatever, and unarmed, if you took that $87 million on top of the money that the RTA bailout package provides for additional security, you could have a police force of 600 cops, making the CTA the safest transit system in the country, which will boost ridership, instead of what you have now, 135 police officers permanently assigned to the CTA to cover the entire CTA, the thousands of rail models, the hundreds of stations, the platforms, the combination stations and platforms. There are more security guarding the mayors than there are full-time police officers assigned to the CTA. So again, all the RTA bailout, all the transportation package, the transportation package was in large part another CTA bailout, and all it does is buy time, and unless the CTA addresses its ridership issue, they're 2-3 years from now, we're going to be back raising more taxes, and the CTA is like that that big sucking sound for area transportation
Right.
is the CTA sucking more and more of your money away.
Yeah, it seems like the big problem in politics is people that rely on the money rather than on providing the services and the quality. Paul Vallas is my guest. Paul, where can people go to read your columns? The Contrarian, is that on Substack?
Yeah,
Or
all you have to do is Google Paul Vallas Chicago Contrarian. So
okay,
really simple.
yes,
And I do a column every Monday on the Contrarian, and I also periodically do columns for the for Illinois Policy, the Illinois Policy Institute.
yeah. They got
So
great data. Illinois Policy Institute has
terrific data.
phenomenal data on money spending, the ranking of the state of Illinois. I do not understand. There's a whole other topic. I won't drag
Yeah.
you into it. How are we going to elect the governor of Illinois to be the president of the United States when Illinois is the worst state in the country? It
Um,
doesn't make sense to me. What's going on with that? Let's save that for another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just close by saying Illinois now ranks. Wallet Hub does this analysis every year.
Yeah.
Illinois ranks 51st because it includes the District of Columbia, and when it comes to state and local tax burden. I'm sorry, they rank first in state and local tax burden. First
being
in
the worst.
They're
the worst state, right?
Right. They're the worst state.
But yes, they're the worst.
But in an analysis that looks at equity, Illinois ranks 51st. So how is the most progressive state in the country that imposes a state and local tax burden that dwarfs anything else any other state imposes, spend the money in such a way that the state ranks dead last when it comes to equity? How does that happen? You know how it happens?
I got it.
It's all about growing government and not about providing and investing in communities. During COVID, there's one stunning statistic. Up until last year, from 2019 to like 2024, Illinois actually didn't see any private sector job growth, but it did see public sector job growth. So we're just growing government. We're not growing the economy. And that's why the tax base continues to contract. And that's why your taxes go up, because, they never stop. The slower the tax growth, the higher the taxes. And that's why you have a governor like Pritzker, who lectures everybody else on fiscal accountability. But yet since COVID, since 2019, when the state got $14 billion in COVID money, he also just happened to raise taxes and fees 55 times, generating over $7 billion a year more
throw
money.
Throw money at the problem. Throw money at the problem. That's the worst policy ever. Paul Vallas, my guest. It's always great to talk to you, Paul. Believe me, and definitely, I know there's some really good people considering running for mayor, but definitely you got to stay involved in politics. Get the word out. Let people understand the brain and genius that you have with managing things. It is a tragedy that you didn't become mayor of Chicago. Would have been our first great mayor in a long time. Paul, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll talk later.